Hello, and thank you for listening to Riverland's financial aid presentation. This is Patty Heeman, and I am the Director of Financial Aid at Riverland Community College. I'm going to begin by going through the application process and the FAFSA and actually show you some screenshots of the FAFSA, then go through the post-application process and finish then with any awards that a student is eligible to receive. I'd first like to let you know that Riverland does offer some tutorials about completing the FAFSA. First, how to complete the FAFSA, and then next, creating that FSA ID and walking you through those two processes. First, what do you need to do to receive and be eligible for financial aid? You do have to be enrolled for or accepted for enrollment in an eligible program of study. You have to be pursuing a recognized program. You do have to be a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen, and you do have to have a high school diploma or a GED. These two items have been removed for the 21-22 financial aid year. So previously to this year, males did have to register for selective service, and all students had to be not convicted of possessing or selling illegal drugs while receiving financial aid. So prior to the current financial aid year, students did have to meet these two requirements. These are no longer required in order for students to receive federal financial aid. An FSA ID, what is it and who needs it? Your FSA ID is your electronic signature or your login for all FSA sites. This includes the FAFSA, the TEACH, and the student loan process. A student and at least one parent of a dependent student must have an FSA ID. The FSA ID needs to be unique to both the student and the parent. They cannot use the same FSA ID. This is a screenshot showing you the FSA ID where you actually create the account. It's all done within the studentaid.gov website. You do have to have a unique email or a cell phone number for each user. You do get to choose your own username and password, but it has to be a unique username, so it cannot be a username that has been used by anyone previously. Either a cell phone number or an email must be entered. If you enter an email, you must confirm that email during the creation of the FSA ID process. Same goes for the cell phone number. How you confirm that email or cell phone number is you will receive, when you put in that email address, the Department of Education will send you an email with a 6-digit confirmation code that you then have to enter in, and then your email or your cell phone number is confirmed. And make sure your name, your date of birth, and your Social Security number match exactly as it is on your Social Security card. Do not use nicknames, shortened names, abbreviated names. Use your full name as it appears on your Social Security card. If an incorrect Social Security number is used, a new FAFSA must be filed with the correct Social Security number, so be very careful to use that correct information. The Department of Education does check to make sure that your date of birth and your Social Security number match what is on file with the Social Security Administration. If it does not match, it will be rejected and you'll have to create a new FSA ID or correct the information within your FSA ID. The free application for federal student aid is an online process. The FAFSA.gov website still does work, but it will automatically redirect you to studentaid.gov. The Department of Education is in the process of moving everything to do with financial aid for a student to the studentaid.gov. So while FAFSA.gov still works, it will automatically and immediately direct you to the studentaid.gov webpage. This is a screenshot showing you the Federal Student Aid website, and under Apply for Aid, there is the Complete the FAFSA form as noted by the red arrow. What tax year do you use on which FAFSA? So for students who are attending from August 21 through July 22, The FAFSA year that you're filing is the 2021 to 2022 FAFSA year. You are using the 2019 taxes, and those FAFSAs could begin being filed October 1, 2020. Most commonly, our high school seniors will be attending August 22 through July 23. So the FAFSA year that they're filing is the 2022 to the 2023 FAFSA using 2020 tax information, and they could begin filing October 1, 2021. And then I've just listed the future dates here for reference for when you can begin filing. So as you can see, October 1 of each calendar year is when that new FAFSA is available to students and parents to begin the application process. And again, submit that FAFSA anytime after October 1. We always recommend the earlier the better. Some colleges do have financial aid deadlines. Some are early. Be sure you check that college's website to see what their priority deadlines are so you're eligible for the maximum aid at the college you plan to attend. Studentaid.gov, the home page. Here's a screenshot of what it looks like. And again, when you apply for aid, if you click on apply for aid, you'll see some items underneath that. First under there is complete the FAFSA form. If you click on that, it will take you into the FAFSA form. Once you click on that, you'll get the choice of, are you new to the FAFSA process or are you returning user? If you're new to the FAFSA process, you can click Start Here. If you've completed one before or started a FAFSA, you are a returning user and simply need to log in. First thing it's going to ask is tell us about yourself. You just have to choose if you're the student completing the FAFSA, if you're a parent filling out the FAFSA, or if somebody else is preparing this FAFSA for you. Once you click on it, once you click on the student, you'll get some additional information. Do you need to log in? Do you need to create that FSA ID? Or do you want to use personal identifiers? And your personal identifiers are your name, your date of birth, and your social security number. I recommend, if you haven't already created an FSA ID, to create that FSA ID before logging in so you've got that created and you automatically can log in then when you arrive at this screen. You do log in with your FSA ID, username, and password here. You'll then be given this screen that asks you to read before you continue. It lets you know that you're accessing the U.S. federal government computer system, that you're not going to provide any false or misleading information, and the purpose of the system, and you have to accept before you can continue here. Then it wants to know, hey, it's time for you to fill out your FAFSA. It wants to know which year FAFSA are you completing. For those of you that are seniors that are starting the process, you want to complete the 22-23 FAFSA form. This is the first screen that you'll see when you log in. Generally, this information is populated if you have already created an FSA ID. It will pull your name, your date of birth, and your social security number from your FSA ID. Something else I want to point out, if you'll look along the top of the screen here, there are 7 tabs. So there are 7 sections of the FAFSA that need to be completed. The section that you're completing is highlighted. Number 1, student demographics, is highlighted, showing that we're working on the student demographics section. Then it asks for an email, and you have to confirm that email as well as a telephone number. Then it will ask the student address. Then it wants to know the student residency and eligibility. What state does the student live in, and have you been a legal resident since January 1, 2017? Then it wants to know, are you a U.S. citizen, eligible non-citizen? If you're an eligible non-citizen, then it will ask you for your alien registration number, but you will only see that if you are an eligible non-citizen. And this screen is the same as the last screen. It just lets you know that, just an additional screen, that when you say, did you become a legal resident, in this case it says Alaska before January 1, 2017, when you say no, then it will ask you the month and year that you did become a legal resident. So just to let you know, the FAFSA uses smart logic and will only show you questions that you should need to answer. Since in the prior screen, we said yes, they'd been a resident, then it didn't ask when did you become a legal resident. When we say no here, then we get an additional question. So it's very nice that the FAFSA has that skip logic. Student education wants to know, what is your high school completion status when you begin college in the 22-23 school year? So most of our students will have a high school diploma. And then it wants to know, what college degree or certificate will you be working on? You'll be working on that bachelor's degree. Will you be working on an associate's degree, a certificate, a diploma? There's many drop-down choices there for you to choose from. Then, will you have your first bachelor's degree before you begin the 22-23 school year? A bachelor's degree is a 4-year college degree. That's not a high school diploma. So if you will have a 4-year degree from college before you graduate, you would say yes here. The majority of our students are going to say no. Then it wants to know, what will your college grade level be when you begin the 22-23 school year? Will you be a freshman, a sophomore, a junior, a senior, or will you be a graduate student? Then the last question it asks on this page is, are you interested in being considered for work study? I always recommend students say yes here. By saying yes, you're not required to take work study. Work study is a job that students do on campus, or there are a few available off campus, but it gives you the option, if you are eligible for work study, to do that, but does not require that you do work study. Then it wants to know, are you male or female? And even though I said that males are no longer required to register for selective service, the Department of Education has not taken this question out of the FAFSA. So as soon as you say male, then it wants to know, are you registered for selective service? If you say yes, then it will go on. If you say no, the FAFSA will give you the option, do you want us to register you for selective service? So if you would like the Department of Education to register you for selective service, you can say yes there. Next, it just wants to know about your student driver's license, the driver's license number, and the state that you have your driver's license. Then some questions about foster care and parent education completion. So you, as the student, have you been in foster care, or were you in foster care system at any time? And then it wants to know the highest level of school completed by parent 1 and parent 2. So did they complete middle school, high school, college? Just to drop down there to choose the different levels of education. Then it wants to know, and again, this is another one of the eligibility items that has been removed. Have you received federal student aid? If you say yes, it wants to know if you've been convicted of possessing or selling illegal drugs. If you say yes, it'll give you some additional questions. Most of you are hopefully going to be able to say no. But again, regardless of what you answer on this question, you will not be stopped from receiving federal financial aid, as this requirement has been removed. Now you'll see that the Student Demographics tab across the top has a green check mark. We have answered all of the questions in that section, and we're ready for school selection. One of the things I want to let you know, it shows up on the screen where it says, where it says add your high school, it says the application was successfully saved. As we go through this FAFSA process, as you go from screen to screen, it will automatically save as you progress through the process, so you don't have to continually save it. The FAFSA is automatically doing that for you. So if you get interrupted and need to come back, you'll be able to log back in, and the FAFSA will go to the spot where you left off. First thing it wants to know is, where did you graduate from high school? You need to list the information where you graduated from high school. You can do that by state, the city, the high school name, so that there's multiple search options here to help you find the high school that you graduated from. You can add your high school manually here, where you list the full name of the state, the city. Then once you do that, you will get a list of high schools that meet the criteria that you entered in. So then you just have to click and choose the high school that you in fact graduated from. Then review the information below to make sure that you have selected that correct high school. The next step in the process is to list the colleges you would like your FAFSA information sent to. One of the nice things about the FAFSA is you can list up to 10 colleges where you would like your FAFSA information sent. You don't have to list 10, you can list anywhere from 1 to 10. If you list 10 colleges and then decide later that you'd like to like your information sent to a college not listed on the FAFSA, you can come back in here and change that information at any time. The school selection process or college selection process is very similar to the high school selection, where you can choose a state, you can choose a city, and you can put in a school name. The only one that's required is the state. You can put in the city, or you can put in the school name, or you can just put in the state, but you're going to get a long list of colleges if that's what you do. You then again will be given a long list of colleges that meet the criteria that you entered. The other option, if your college that you've been looking at has given you a federal school code, you're able to put in that federal school code and avoid that search process, because as soon as you put in that school code, it will automatically pull that. For each of the colleges you list on the FAFSA, you do need to list whether you will be living on campus, off campus, or with parents. So school selection is done. We're on to number 3, the dependency status. Dependency status is where we determine, does the student need to list parents' information, or are they not required to list parent information? So the first question is the marital status today of the student. Next, does that student have any dependents? Do they have any children of their own? And be sure you note that that child has to be receiving more than half of their support from the student between July 1, 22 and June 30, 23. Then it wants to know, are there any other dependents other than your children or spouse who live with you who receive more than half of their support from you? This would be if a student has a brother or a sister or a grandparent that maybe is dependent on them. Then there are some additional student dependency questions asking, have they been in the military, or are they veteran at any time since they turned age 13? Were both of their parents deceased, or were they in foster care, or have they been a dependent or ward of the court? Are they an emancipated minor? Does someone other than a parent or step-parent have legal guardianship of you? So it will ask those additional questions. Wants to know if the student is homeless, or if they were self-supporting or at risk of being homeless. Then it gives you the choice, or it tells you, hey, based on the answers to your dependency status, you're considered a dependent student and you must provide parental information. Now, if you have special circumstances and are unable to provide that parental information, you can submit the FAFSA without parental information, but know that you're going to have to provide some additional documentation if you in fact do that. Criteria for being an independent applicant. This means that you don't have to use your parents' information. The list is here if you're married, if you're a graduate student, if you're 24 or over, if you're a veteran or active duty military, and by veteran or active duty, that's more than just basic training. So you can't be in the Guard and be considered independent because you've only been active duty for basic training. It does take more than active duty for basic training. So most students who are single under the age of 24 without dependents of their own are required to use parents' information. Then just a screen so you know whose parents should I provide. So if you click on the down arrow where it says my parents live together, married or unmarried, if you click on that down arrow, it will give you some additional information. So who are my parents when I file my FAFSA? So this chart will just help you walk through who are considered your parents. Are your parents married to each other? If yes, you report both your parents' information on the FAFSA. If no, if your parents never got married, they live together, then you still report both information on the FAFSA. Did you live with one parent more than the other if your parents are not married and they don't live together? Then you report the information on the FAFSA for the parent you lived with the more. If that parent has remarried, then you also need to report step-parent information. The following people are never considered parents unless they have legally adopted the student. So grandparents, foster parents, legal guardians, brothers or sisters, aunts or uncles, or a widowed step-parent are never considered parents. If you live with one of these people, you're probably going to be considered independent and not have to provide parents' information, but be sure you reach out to the financial aid administrator at the college that you are attending. Then it takes you into parent demographics, and now all of the questions here, if you see, we're in section number 4, are regarding the parents and should be answered regarding the parents. So as of today, what is the marital status of your parents, and what month or year did they get married or remarried? Then it asks about first parent information, their social security number, their last name, their date of birth, their first initial, and their email address. Then since we said parents were married, it asks for second parent information. If you said parents are single, widowed, divorced, you will not see second parent information. Another item, you do not have to have a social security number for a parent in order to complete the FAFSA. So if parents are either not in the United States or do not have a social security number, when a social security number is completed, you just enter all zeros. So the parent does not have to have a social security number in order to complete the FAFSA. You just list all zeros under the parent social security number and list the rest of the information. Then it wants to know the parent state of legal residence. On the prior screen, we asked what was the state of legal residence. Now it wants to know, have they lived here for 5 years? Then it wants to know, enter information about your parents' dependents. How many dependent children do your parents have? And it wants to know how many children do they have that are receiving more than half of their financial support between July 1, 22 and June 30th of 23. And then also the students that can answer no to every dependency status question on the FAFSA form. Then how many other dependents do your parents have? This include parents' other dependents if they now live with your parents, receive more than half of their support from your parents, and will continue to receive more than half of their support from the parents. This would be any grandparents, nieces and nephews, anybody else who is living with your parents who receive more than half of their support from the parents. Then it gives you a summary of your household information. So it says your household information is 9 based on information that was entered on the previous screen. So it comes up with the 9 from you as the student, your 2 parents, and then it was listed that there are 2 other dependent children, and then there are 2 other dependents who are living with the parents, so a total of 9. So now it wants you to list how many of those people in the parent's household are in college, and it says 7 dependents because students are not able to list a parent in college. So of the 7 others in the family, so if you, the 2 dependent children, and the other 2 dependents, how many of those are in college? Then it talks about the data retrieval tool, which is commonly referred to as the DRT. Based on your responses, we recommend that you, the parents, transfer your information directly from the IRS to the FAFSA. This is free, safe, secure. We strongly recommend, if this is an option and available to you, that you automatically pull your information from your tax return to the FAFSA. It makes the process easier and just cleaner for the student and the parent if you can use that DRT. So it gives you this option. If you prefer not to, you can say no thanks. You still have to enter all the information. You just have to manually enter it. We recommend that you proceed to the IRS site. You then have to answer, are you parent 1 or are you parent 2? Which one of the parents? Because then you have to fill in that matching FSA ID username and password. So you choose the parent who has the FSA ID, put in their username and password, and continue. Then it warns you that you are leaving the FSA form. Still gives you the option to opt out to skip that IRS DRT and complete manually, but remember, you're still entering the same information. You're just manually entering it, or you can proceed to the IRS. And again, I strongly recommend you proceed to the IRS if you have that option. You get one more warning before you go that you're now leaving this page and going to the IRS, so recommend click on OK. Then the IRS gives you a warning and lets you know, hey, you're now entering the IRS webpage. Then your information is pulled automatically for you from your FAFSA, so it knows your first name, your last name, your social security number, date of birth. You then have to answer, what is your tax filing status? And then you have to list your street address, your P.O. box number if you have one, apartment number if you have one, and your city, state, and zip. Now when you fill out your address, it must match exactly as it is on your 2020 income taxes. Make sure that everything matches exactly. Once you've entered that information, you click on Submit. Hopefully everything will match for you and you will get this information, and it gives you the list of information that's going to be transferred directly from your tax return to the FAFSA. And then you click on the top button here and where it says transfer my tax information, and then click on the blue transfer now. Who can use this IRS data retrieval tool? What happens, it automatically transfers that data from your tax return to the FAFSA. Approximately 84% of families are eligible to use this. Who can't use this data retrieval are married couples who filed separate tax returns. If you've recently filed your tax return, you won't be able to use it. If your marital status has changed since you filed your 2020 taxes, or if you've not paid your tax liability, if you had any for the 2020 tax year, you will not be able to use this tool. Items that are not populated by this data retrieval tool, so this is information that you're going to need to supply as you complete the FAFSA. So if you have any of these items, you'll want to have them ready. So any child support you paid or received, any earnings from work study programs, payments to tax-deferred pension plans that you pull from your W-2, any housing, food, or living allowances, for example, those received by the military or clergy, any veterans non-educational benefits, any other untaxed income or other money received or paid on your behalf. Be sure, just a note here, do not include any untaxed Social Security. If you receive Social Security and it is not taxed by the IRS, then it is also not listed on the FAFSA. Once you click on that Transfer Now, it will take you to your FAFSA, back to your FAFSA, where your information will show that it was transferred from the IRS. So while you still see the question, what is your parent's adjusted gross income for 2020, it is grayed out, you can't enter anything, and it says transferred from IRS. So you don't need to complete anything on this screen. The next screen, you do have to determine how much did your parents earn from work, parent 1 and parent 2. And again, if you only list one parent, for example, if the parents are divorced, widowed, then you will only be asked about one parent and not about a second parent. The one thing I want to note is that behind each box is that little question mark in the circle. If you click on that question mark, it will give you a help. So it will tell you, where do I find my parents earning from work? Which box on my W-2 do I look at to find that information? Or do I need to look at a tax return or a schedule? Most parents are receiving W-2 income, and so it's simply looking at a W-2. If the parent owns their own business or is farming, they will have to use the tax return in some of the schedules. Parent additional IRS, enter the amount of your parent's income tax for 2020. Again, for this student, it was transferred from the IRS, so no amount needs to be entered. Then it wants to know some additional, this is where that untaxed information comes from, where some of these items are grayed out and it says transferred from IRS, but there are a couple of questions on income that you do need to answer here. And again, please note this is the parent question. Then parents' additional financial information, so this is child support paid, any earnings under a cooperative education program, any taxable earnings from need-based employment. So those amounts need to be completed here. Then just some additional questions regarding parents' income. Then it wants to know about assets. As of today, so as not previously we used all 2020 income, but now the assets are as of today. What is the balance of your cash, savings, and checking account? So if you walked into your bank today and emptied your checking and your savings account and took the money you had in your pocket, how much would you have in holding in your hands? So that's the amount you list there. Then the next one is your parents' investments. This is your stocks, your bonds, your KIOs, not your parents' home. And then the net worth of your parents' current business or investment farms. Do not include a family farm or family business with 100 or fewer full-time employees. So assets, what are assets? What are included as assets? What are not included as assets? So first, what do you include? Like I said, the money in your cash, savings, and checking account. Any investment farm you own. So an investment farm is considered a farm you own but do not operate. Investments including CDs, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, into any rental real estate including land you own but do not farm, a house you own but do not live in, you rent out, a trust fund, a business you own but you do not operate. What do you not include? The home you live in. It doesn't matter how much it's worth. The home you live in is not included. Any retirement account is not included. It doesn't matter if it's employer sponsored or just something you've opened on your own. An IRA, a 401k, a Roth, a SEP, a KIO, none of those are considered an asset as part of the FAFSA. They are all eliminated. The farm you own and operated. are not considered an asset. So that includes the land, the livestock, the machinery, the buildings. Anything to do with that farm is not an asset for FAFSA purposes. A business you own and operate, if it employs less than 100 people, is not considered an asset. So as long as you don't employ more than 100 people, your business is not an asset. That again includes any vehicles, buildings, supplies, equipment that you may own as part of that business is not an asset. The value of any life insurance is not an asset, and the cars that you own are not an asset. Remember that the net worth of your investment is the amount left over after deducting any debt from the value of the investment. And 529's plans are listed as an asset under the owner of the plan. So if the student is the owner of the plan, it is an asset for the student. If the parents own the plan, it is an asset for the parent. If somebody else owns the 529 plan, for example, a grandparent, it is not listed as an asset on the FAFSA. Next, it asks about student filing status, and just so you know, you do not have to file taxes in order to complete the FAFSA. Under the, for 2020, have you completed your IRS income tax return or another tax return? Where it says already completed here, one of the options there is not going to file. So you do not have to complete a FAFSA in order to, or complete a tax return in order to complete the FAFSA. And again, it takes the student through all of the same financial screens, the same process that the parent did. I don't show all of the student screens because they mirror exactly what the parent screens look like. Then you get to the FAFSA Summary, where you get a list of all of the information that you just listed on the FAFSA. Then you get the signature, where the student needs to read and confirm the information, and they can sign and submit the FAFSA form. They have to confirm that they entered the true and correct information, and they understand, has the authority to verify information reported on the application. So it's just confirming that they did in fact provide the true and correct information, and understand there is a penalty if they did not. Then you receive the signature status. The student signed with the FSA ID, and it says that gives the information there. But then it says, hey, the parent needs to sign this FAFSA as well. Wants to know, is parent 1 or parent 2 signing this FAFSA? The parent again has to agree that they did provide the true and correct information. The parent then enters their FSA ID, username and password to sign the FAFSA form. There is the option, if the parent is not a legal U.S. citizen or resident, and has no social security number, so does not have the option to get an FSA ID. If you see on this screen, there are other options to sign and submit down here on the bottom. There's the other options to sign and submit. If you click on that, you'll be able to print a signature page. That's where our parents without a social security number can just can print that signature page, sign it, and send it in. So you do not have to have a social security number to complete this process. This is so as you complete the FAFSA, you enter all zeros as the parent, and then when it comes to the signature, you click on other options and you sign and submit that paper signature page. Now it says, hey, congratulations, you have submitted the FAFSA. You get a confirmation number, and it will tell you a little bit about the information about the colleges you listed on your FAFSA. This is just letting you know that when you use that data retrieval tool, about a week after you've used it, you will get a letter from the IRS letting you know that your information was accessed by this DRT. So it's just kind of a warning here to let you know that this happens. So you've submitted your FAFSA. Now what happens? What are the next steps in the process? The FAFSA results, the student is notified of the processing results by email if you listed an email address on while you completed that FAFSA. And those results are called a student aid report, or a SAR for short. You will see a few scholarship applications that will ask for a student aid report, so or a SAR. That's what they're asking for, your FAFSA results. If you do not list an email address on your FAFSA, the Department of Ed will mail those results to you. Every college that you've listed on the FAFSA will electronically receive the results of the FAFSA at the same time. The colleges will receive that information at the same time that the student is receiving that email. If you need to make corrections, you can go back to the studentaid.gov and click on Login. You can add a college, you can correct any FAFSA data items, or you can use the data retrieval tool if you did not use the data retrieval tool the first time. This is a screenshot showing a student who had completed their FAFSA. It was processed successfully, but gives you the options here to update school information. So again, if the schools you listed, you found a new one that you want your information sent to, you can update the schools. If you found that you've listed information incorrectly, you can edit your FAFSA, or you can view your student aid report. That's another option within this screen. So you can look at that student aid report and print it if you want to review your information, or if you need to submit it to an outside organization. The Department of Education randomly chooses students who complete the FAFSA for a process called verification. If you are chosen for verification, it doesn't mean you did anything wrong. It just simply means that you were chosen for verification. What can be verified through this process? The number of household members in college, any data retrieval items that you did not use the data retrieval tool for. So if you use the data retrieval tool to enter your tax information, you should never be asked for copies of your taxes. Any income earned from work, your high school completion status, or an identity statement of educational purposes. These are the items that you can be chosen for verification. Most of them you verify just by filling out a form that college will send you. Pretty easy process, nothing is overly intense through this. Professional judgment, like I said, everything within the FAFSA used tax year 2020. Now, we understand as financial aid professionals and the Department of Education that 2020 was a couple years ago that is using old tax information. So if in fact your income has been reduced from 2020, be sure you contact the financial aid administrators at the college where you're attending and ask them for a professional judgment. Those college administrators can, while you as a student or parent have to use 2020 tax information, that college professional administrator is able to update your information to more clearly reflect your ability to pay and use more current income information. Dependency override. Now, while I said students who are single under the age of 24 without dependents of their own do have to use parents' information, we do understand there is a group of students who, even though they meet those guidelines, are not able to provide parental information due to abuse, neglect, abandonment, incarceration. So we do have options. It's called dependency override. If you work with your high school counselor or a professional, they will be able to assist you through this process, but you do need to contact the financial aid office at the college you're attending to find out what their instructions are and what kind of documentation you need to provide. If you complete the FAFSA without parents' information, you will limit yourself to only unsubsidized student loans. You will not be eligible for any grant dollars. So if you are required to provide parental information, we strongly recommend that those parents do provide that information. By parents listing their information, they are not agreeing to pay for their students' education. They are not committed to providing any kind of financial aid support to that student. They are only listing their income information to determine their students' financial aid eligibility. Once you get through that verification process and submit any additional documentation that may be asked for, the student should receive an award notification from every college they've listed on the FAFSA. Financial aid does vary depending on cost, but the Pell Grant is always the same regardless of the cost of the college. Sources of financial aid. What are you going to see on that award letter? There's first the federal grants, which is the Pell Grant, the Supplemental Grant, and the Teach Grant. The Pell Grant is for all eligible students. That money does not run out. Doesn't matter when you apply. If you're eligible for the Pell Grant, you receive that. The Supplemental Grant goes to the highest need students. That is a limited amount of money that each college receives each year. So if you have a low income, you're going to want to submit your FAFSA early. And then the Teach Grant is specifically for our students going into the education field. Then there's the state grants and scholarships. So we have the Minnesota State Grant for Minnesota residents attending a college within the state of Minnesota. The Minnesota Indian Scholarship for students who are American Indian ancestry. Post-secondary child care grant for students who have children to help cover daycare expenses. And the Minnesota GI Bill is for students who have been in the military. Then there's the institutional scholarships and grants. These are the money that comes from the college that you could be attending. And then private scholarships. Those are going to come from your high schools, from your various organizations within your community. And this just lists some national scholarship searches that you can assist you through the whole process. Federal and state work study. Work study is a job that students do on campus. And like I said, there's a few off campus, but those tend to be with the nonprofits. You can work during the summer. They're great educational opportunities and great resume builders. Then we have student loans. Student loans are borrowed money. It's all borrowed from the federal government. No credit check or employment history. You just have to be taking 6 or more credits and you are eligible for student loans. So any student who completes the FAFSA, enrolls in 6 or more credits is eligible for student loans. Like I said, no credit check, and repayment does not begin until 6 months after you graduate or stop attending. The first type of federal student loan is the subsidized loan. Second is the unsubsidized loan. The loan limit amounts are listed here. Then we have the PLUS loan. While the parent has no responsibility in the direct student loan in repayment, that is solely the student's responsibility. We then have the PLUS loan, which is a parent loan where the parent is the borrower and the student is not responsible for repayment. So 2 types of loans depending on who you would like to be responsible for repayment. Then there's a multitude of alternative loans. Be very careful when requesting an alternative loan that you know the interest rate, the fees, and the terms of the loan. Be sure you go to the college where your student is attending and ask them about loan options, and they will let you know the best loan options that are available at the college that your student will be attending. Tuition reciprocity. This just lets you know that if you are a Minnesota resident attending one of the neighboring colleges, you can apply for tuition reciprocity, which gives you a tuition rate very similar to the in-state tuition rate at an out-of-state college. Higher education tax and savings incentives. I just like to let you know that at the same time you're receiving your W-2, so by the end of January, when you receive your W-2, you should also receive a 1098-T from the college where your student is attending. This will contain information about tuition and fees, amount paid. This will be used by your tax preparer to give you some tax credit eligibility. For all of this information on the tax advantages, you will want to contact your tax preparer. The financial aid office will not assist you through this process. This is your tax preparer that will assist you through this process. Remember, a new FAFSA needs to be filled out each academic year. This is not a one and done. You have to do this each October 1st when the FAFSA opens. You have to complete a new process each year. So where do you go from here? Obtain and review any admission and financial aid materials from each school you'll be applying for, meet all application deadlines, complete the FAFSA, and investigate any other sources of financial aid. This is my contact information. Even if you're not attending Riverland, if you have questions while you're completing the FAFSA, please feel free to call or email me, and I can assist you and answer many of those questions for you. And that's all I have for you today. Like I said, if you have any questions, please reach out to me and I will be glad to assist you. You can also reach out to the college that you are attending and they can assist you through that process as well. Thank you.